Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian Sanabria, host of the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast and principal researcher at the Defenders Initiative. Today, I'm talking to Theresa Lanowitz, the chief cybersecurity evangelist at LevelBlue. And today, we're talking about how businesses can achieve true cyber resilience. Good to talk with you again, Theresa. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Adrian. It's wonderful to be back here with you.
Yeah, likewise. Love having these conversations with you, particularly around resilience. I've been predicting that that is going to be a big term this year. I don't want to say a buzzword because it's something we really need to get done. But of course, as terms catch on, they do tend to be overused and used out of context. So for folks listening to this, we're going to nail that down for you and help you understand what true resilience is here. And today, drawing from Level Blue's latest research, we're going to explore the key attributes of a cyber resilient organization, practical strategies for mitigating risk, and the business impact of a strong resilience framework. So, Teresa, starting off here, it's been a while that cybersecurity attacks have become mainstream. I think everybody's aware of them now. We've both been in the cybersecurity industry for decades. So it's still somewhat surreal to me, that this is just normal page one type stuff, that friends and family now ask us about. I presume in your case also, this is just normal conversation these days. And it used to be when I was a pen tester, we used to joke around that we needed to have breach as a service because we noticed, noticeably companies that have had a breach before had incurred a very public, very painful incident, suddenly took security a lot more seriously. And if we could just somehow accelerate that, it seems like we're at that point now where it's really tough to say, yeah, it's not going to happen to us. We don't have anything. So this is something I used to hear all the time. We don't have anything attackers want. And I'd say, do you have a bank account? Do you have money in that bank account? You got something they want.
Absolutely. You're so spot on with that because these breaches have become just de rigueur, part of our normal existence. Every day we wake up, we read about these things in the news every single day. And here we are at the beginning of 2025. And last year in 2024, we had a couple of really big, profound security incidences as well as business outages that I think really made people step back, as you said, and just think differently because there's something out there, there's something in the ether that everybody has out there, whether it be your bank account, your social security number, your home address, private health care information that is out there and is certainly of value to some type of adversary. So we read about these breaches, and I don't think we need the breaches of service any longer because I think people have gotten the message loud and clear that yes, this can happen to you, and it can be devastating. It can be devastating to you personally. It can be devastating to your business, to the brand of your business. So there are a lot of things that can happen, and I think people are starting to take it seriously. And years ago, you would talk to especially smaller businesses, and they would say, "Well, I don't have anything." But suddenly, we started to see adversaries go after those smaller businesses. And while they may not be as valuable as a big Fortune 10 type of company, if you get enough of them, if you're able to crack the code on enough of those smaller businesses, you're just operating on volume versus on one big win for the adversary. So everybody is at play now, everybody is at risk, and everybody has stakes in the game.
And again, going back to my pen testing experience, scoping discussions were often a big part of setting up a pen test. You discuss with the company, okay, what are we allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? What are the rules of engagement? And there'd be, well, you can't hit the manufacturing stuff because, the moment it gets scanned, it'll fall over. That stuff is very sensitive. It's very fragile, or, this is a very, this subsidiary is very sensitive. We can't, and we try and throw out there, those rules don't apply to the adversaries we're trying to emulate there, just to throw that out there. And so, that kind of leads me into the conversation, and this for me is like 10, 15 years ago, we were having these conversations. Um, how should organizations be thinking about cyber resilience? Is that kind of, what I'm sharing from my past there, like the discomfort of taking things off the table and de-scoping things, the concerns we used to have as penetration testers about leaving that kind of stuff out. Is that kind of where we're going with some of this?
This is a perfect segue into thinking about why cyber resilience is so important because you're thinking about back to your pen testing days when you're saying, you can't do something, you can't throw a SQL injection, for example, into something that hits manufacturing because that's going to have a rippling effect. The adversary is taking these tools and now weaponizing them against us. And so, what that brings us to is this whole idea about cyber resilience. So, cyber resilience has the word cyber in it. And just because it has the word cyber in it doesn't mean that it is only for the cybersecurity team to take note of. Cyber resilience is how that whole business responds to something that happens to the entire IT estate, whether it be a cybersecurity breach, whether it be something that is man-made in terms of a disaster or a natural disaster. So how that organization copes and recovers from a cyber incident, a man-made disaster, or a natural disaster, that's where this whole notion of cyber resilience comes into play. And resilience is such a powerful word. We use it a lot. And you mentioned at the beginning that you believe that resilience is going to be one of the central themes that we talk about this year. And I totally concur with you. So I think that we look at, back to your days of pen testing again, those days have moved forward very much because the adversary has access to the same tooling that we do. They can weaponize that tooling very, very easily. And when that entire IT estate is hit, how does the business respond? How does the business cope? Because if there's something that happens inside of an application that's running your business, for example, that's not the responsibility of the cyber team, the cybersecurity team to go and remediate. You have to bring in the development team, the operations team, the networking team. Maybe there's somebody in the supply chain. You have to bring in the legal team, possibly the finance team. So depending upon how far it spreads into the business and into the organization, you have to think about it from a whole business perspective. And that's why cyber resilience is so critical.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight on a term that you use there, recovery, right? Because
Mhm.
I think traditionally, security teams have kind of hyper focused on preventing the attack from happening at all. And then we realize, what, these attacks are going to happen. We need to get really good at detection. And then, with a lot of these tools like EDR, things with detect and respond in them, that respond, and, that there's another R, recovery, are very light in a lot of those tools and products and things like that. And oftentimes it's during the incident itself that people are figuring out, what their playbook should be for recovery. And I feel like we're getting into a time where you're going to start seeing on your cyber insurance forms, you're going to start getting asked by the board, by executives, what those recovery plans are, and how, just taking the breach, the incident for granted that it's going to occur, and yeah, how much time to get the business back up and running? How much time, if some of
Right.
these scenarios occur, I feel like a lot of businesses aren't even close to ready to answer that kind of question, or really know until they do it what that recovery time even looks like.
And you're so right that oftentimes this activity is going on real time in the midst of some type of breach. And we learned from our research only 35% of organizations have a formalized incident response plan. So,
Ooh.
you don't, this is not something that you want to kind of wing it or something that you want to say, well,
No.
we'll figure it out as we go along. This is something that you have to have in your playbook, codified in your playbook, and something that you have to have drills on. How do we withstand? How can we recover? How do we withstand an attack against our infrastructure? How do we withstand an attack against this type of application that runs our business? So this is something that you have to plan for, something that you have to do on a regular basis, not just be in the moment with it.
Yeah, and at least tabletop, do something. I used to spend a lot of time on disaster recovery, both as a consultant and on the enterprise side. And I used to say, like, if you haven't actually pulled the trigger, if you haven't pulled that switch, pulling production over to whatever that recovery scenario looks like, maybe 50% of what needs to be there has been thought of already. And the other
Right.
50%, you realize as it's happening, oh, we forgot to take this into account. Oh, we forgot to think about, switching from DR back to production, right? Like, how does that work? Can the DR environment even handle the full load of what it needs to once we get it up and running there? There's
Right. And
just
it
so
goes
many.
beyond tabletop too, right? I mean, it comes
Yeah.
down to crisis. It's crisis recovery. What do we do in a significant crisis? What if everything we have was taken offline? Well, how do we handle that? How do we handle that from a communications perspective? How do we handle that from a shareholder perspective? How do we handle that from a customer perspective? So it comes down to crisis simulation as well.
Yeah. And in your experience, you have a lot of conversations with folks. What are kind of the common barriers that what's preventing people from getting into resilience here? I know for some organizations, it's going to be a long path, right? It's just keeping stuff up and running is a full-time job for them. So to tell them, oh, also you need to simulate bad things happening to this and be able to withstand or recover quickly from those things when they're just trying to keep the lights on, right? Like what are some of the barriers here?
And you're right. It is so difficult to maintain that business and maintain that business at a high level. But the top thing that we found in our research that really prohibited people from understanding real cyber resilience is that governance teams do not understand what cyber resilience is. 72% of governance teams around the world are saying, we're not sure what cyber resilience is. And as a result of that, what you also see is that cyber resilience is not thought of then as a whole business problem. People then say, well, it has the word cyber in it, and I'm already paying, I'm already in my budget, I'm
Hmm.
already allocating money for my cybersecurity team. So this is something that the cybersecurity team should be responsible for. It's not that whole business problem. Or some people may say, you know, we just don't understand why we need to do it from a C-level perspective. And we had a lot of people in our global survey say as well that the C-level doesn't understand the importance of cyber resilience. So couple that with governance teams, the lack of support for funding it, the lack of support in terms of saying that, yes, it's a whole business problem. And you come up with this very real scenario that we're in where when something does happen, there's a lot of finger pointing saying, hey, it's a cybersecurity incident. The cybersecurity team needs to take care of it. And there's a lot of finger pointing, and especially when it comes to budgeting as well. People are just not willing because, as you said, it's tough to just keep the lights on in many businesses. They're just not willing to allocate resources for it.
Do you find examples help here? Remember when MGM had a ransomware attack and, people in the casinos couldn't use the ATMs? Like that's cyber resilience. Or, Colonial Pipeline's billing system didn't work and they couldn't distribute gasoline to gas stations. Do examples kind of help people get it here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think examples help tell the story. When you have great data, such as the data that we have inside of our LevelBlue futures report, that data, you can look at that data and you can say, well, it's kind of head in the sand approach. It's just not going to happen to me. But then you start to bring out real world examples, and suddenly you're saying, look, this many Americans were impacted by this type of breach just a year ago. And suddenly people start to say, that's a significant number. Or you start to say, here's what happened. Here's what happened maybe with some third party infiltration in the supply chain. And organizations will say, well, yes, of course, we have a supply chain that we have to secure and take care of. Could this happen to us? So I think just those high profile breaches, those high profile outages, those high profile incidents that we see on an ongoing basis, people then take a look at them and say, this is hitting a little too close to home. And
Mhm.
it's not just, as they said, big Fortune 10 companies under attack. It's companies of all types, companies of all sizes. And then we need to do something to shore up our cyber resilience, and as a part of that, also our security.
Yeah, and I mean, some of it, at least the tabletops, I feel like a lot of people just haven't even considered what could happen, right?
Right.
Imagine you lost email for a month, right? Like that's just going to break some people's brains, right?
Right. Right.
Or Slack was suddenly gone. Do you even know how you would do normal day-to-day things? Do you know how, and more we see adversaries understand how to disrupt companies and are tailoring their operations to that. They find they get a higher likelihood of payouts if they figure out how to directly impact revenue coming into the company. They can
Yes.
get a lot more leverage if they can stop money coming in.
Yeah, it's an impact to revenue, but you used a key word there, disruption. And some adversaries, depending upon what their goal is, not all adversaries are motivated by finance. So not all adversaries are saying, yes, we want to be able to collect money for ransomware, for example. Some adversaries are saying, we just want to disrupt business. We want to disrupt the day-to-day business operations of a certain type of vertical industry. And so therefore we'll attack, a certain company that is critical to the overall uh, day-to-day operations of some type of business. So the adversaries also have different goals and different priorities in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's yeah, I think you hit on something key there, the different priorities and the uh ever going need to realign with the business, right? Like one of the things that
Absolutely.
occurred to me once. I was reading a paper, and this was actually about the quality assurance industry from Elizabeth Hendricks back in 2001. She found that by putting quality assurance into a development team, developers stopped worrying about quality because it sent the signal that, oh, quality is somebody else's job now. And I
Hmm.
remember reading that and thinking, did we do the same thing with cybersecurity? Did we silo ourselves off by creating security departments in the late 90s and early 2000s? Did we send the signal that, oh, you don't need to worry about security, or worse, you can't do security right, leave it to us? I know in some organizations it was kind of a um, adversarial relationship between security teams and IT teams and things like that. So I wonder if we didn't make a mistake by somewhat isolating security from the rest of the business and the rest of IT, and if we need to somewhat bring that back together, bring those relationships back.
When you take a look at security from a historical perspective, I don't know that it's necessarily that we isolated as much as we said, these are the skills that we need. And security started to be something different and separate, maybe about 30 years ago or so. And there was this group of people who gravitated to this notion of security and said, these are the skills we're going to be developed. It's not just this one person in the organization who's reading this sort of, hey, here's what's coming with respect to emerging technology. This is something that's real. This is something that we have to work on. And so building up silos, I think, are natural because it's where the skill set lies. You look at sports teams, we're going into Super Bowl weekend here. So we have kickers, for example, who could never go out and play the center position, for example.
Very
It's just
specialized. Yeah.
very, very specialized. And I think that's where we have been now with cybersecurity in that we have a specialized group, but it has now that specialization has matured. It has gone beyond, hey, let's just go around and put firewalls on everything and put antiviruses out there to we need to align security with what is going on inside of the business. So security has moved from a technical solution or a technical problem to solve to being a business requirement. And that's one of the things that you can do to be more cyber resilient is not treat that cybersecurity team as an isolated silos. Because what we found in our research is that security teams, cybersecurity teams are overlooked, under budgeted, an afterthought, and definitely live in a silo. And that comes down to organizational structure and it comes down to the need to collaborate, and that idea of collaboration and sharing of information coming from the top down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think from the top down, that is definitely one of those things. I do a lot of mentoring of not just people coming into cybersecurity, but people who've been in for a while, and I think that's one of the most common things I hear is like, I just don't feel like this organization takes it very seriously. And I don't know what to do at this point. And the answer is typically, well, if leadership isn't pushing this as a priority, there's probably not a whole lot you can do to change their mind or shift them. Like you can try, but honestly, it'd almost be easier to go over to an organization that, where that's already established, where leadership leads by example, and already takes this kind of thing seriously. I wonder.
Exactly. And in so many organizations that have suffered some type of security incident, the leadership is then realigned. And oftentimes, what you do is you have a change agent that is brought in to specifically say, let's make sure that cybersecurity is included in everything we're doing. Let's make sure we are developing secure by design systems. Make sure that we're bringing in trusted advisors to help us along. So that change agent may as well. So if you're in an organization that doesn't really value security, if there is some type of incident, you can expect that there would most likely be some type of realignment on that leadership team.
You would hope. You would hope at
Yes, you
least.
would hope. You would absolutely hope. And I think one of the other things, and this is something that I think goes unnoticed, it's when you do have those types of breaches, how the company, how the organization really handles that breach, what they have in terms of those brand values of the organization, that shows you how committed they are to security. It was probably over 10 years ago now, there was a high profile breach in the retail industry, and that company that was breached handled it superbly. They really were customer focused on how that breach was handled, and all they've done since then is prove to their customers, prove to the people who value that relationship with that particular retailer, that they are doing more and more and more to be proactive and align security with the way business is being done. So I think it's how that company, if there is some type of cyber event, how the company handles it, what their brand value stands for, and how they respond to that cyber event that they have to recover from.
Now, for me, I think that's why I feel like our industry is at a bit of a, at a watershed moment here where whether it's how to handle a breach correctly, or examples of why you need to be resilient, or examples of what being resilient looks like. We have no shortage of good examples to point to of all these things. So this is no longer theoretical. For a long time, I feel like security was like we think this is a best practice, right? Like this seems
Mhm.
like a good thing to do. Well, now we have evidence. We've had so many breaches, we've been through so much stuff, and we've seen so many good and bad examples of how to do it correctly, how not to do it correctly, that most of this is not theoretical anymore. I don't think. Like there are
That's
examples you can
profound.
point to. Yeah.
Right, that's profound. This is no longer theoretical. We have evidence. There is an abundance of evidence out there. There's an abundance of evidence of how to do things correctly, an abundance of evidence as to how to not do things. But you're right, it's no longer theoretical.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is good, but now we need to bring people there. We still need
Yeah.
to drag people along into the age of resilience here, and maybe that's what we talk about next here before we wrap up the conversation. What can, and you've already thrown out a couple things, like having the whole organization on the same page about the
Mhm.
importance of resilience and having that come down from the top. What are some of the other things organizations can be doing to become more cyber resilient?
All right, this is a great question. So let me enumerate them. First, understand the barriers. So look inside your own organization. Does your governance team understand what cyber resilience is? Are you budgeting for it? Are you doing those types of things that you mentioned, such as tabletop exercises? So understand the barriers to cyber resilience. Second, make sure that you are secure by design, which means security is not an afterthought. When you're building a system, security is thought about, security is planned for from the beginning. So that idea of being secure by design is critical. Third, bring in trusted advisors. Bring in those experts who have seen this on a regular basis, who know about this. Bring in cybersecurity consultants, managed security service providers, global systems integrators to help with implementing change, to also help with as you're bringing on new systems, or as you're creating new projects, new source code, that sort of thing. Bring in those trusted advisors to help. Fourth, make sure that you are bringing cybersecurity and the line of business closer together. Make sure that what you're doing from a customer experience perspective is frictionless with cybersecurity, but also make sure that your customer can understand that yes, this is what they're doing in order to make me safer, in order to make sure that cybersecurity is there. And then fifth, realign your cybersecurity strategy. Understand, and what I mean by this is understand your attack surface. Look at the tooling that you're using. Do you have the right tooling? Are you using both proactive and reactive cybersecurity types of controls and capabilities? So reassess what you're doing on a regular basis and understand what your cybersecurity strategy and structure actually looks like. So those are the 5 things organizations can do to be more cyber resilient.
And because you brought up the Super Bowl and we have that sports analogy going, if I could add like a bonus one there, yeah, I like imagine how these teams would play if the only time they played football was on the field in front of a crowd, right? If there was no
Right,
practice, right?
right,
Like
right.
the only time they picked up a ball was for the real thing when the cameras were rolling. It would be a mess, right? Like you got to
Or if they, or,
practice.
right, you have to practice, but you also have to do the things that help you get to be able to practice, lifting weights, proper nutrition,
Yeah.
all those things come into play and make you and make these incredible teams that are playing this coming weekend that make them resilient athletes as well.
Yeah, you can't casually be good at this stuff.
Right, right.
Yeah, well, maybe a few people can. Maybe there's a few out there, but probably not us. Probably not most of us. We got to work at it.
Yeah, and that's such a great analogy that you can't casually be good at something such as professional football, and you can't casually be good at something such as cyber resilience and being a good cybersecurity professional.
Yeah. So, looking forward, what kind of trends are you seeing here? Are you seeing organizations having success with cyber resilience? And maybe after you answer that question, you can tell us a little bit about any new research that you're planning out at Level Blue and working on.
I think we're about to see a pendulum shift. When you look at everything that happened in 2024, and everything that happened in 2024 informs the way we go forward. So we had some big breaches in 2024, we had some big outages in 2024. This idea of cyber resilience started to take root in 2024. So as we move into 2025 and the new research that you can expect from Level Blue, I think what you're going to see is that this idea of cyber resilience being a whole organization issue, I think that's a little bit more understood because of things that happened in 2024. Because as you said, this is no longer theoretical, this is real.
Yeah, well said. And any new research you're working on for
We do
2025?
have new research coming out. We've been talking a little bit today about our Level Blue Futures Report from 2024, Cyber Resilience. You can expect to see that theme of cyber resilience carry on in 2025 for the thought leadership research that we'll be producing. You can expect to see us talk more about that idea of cyber resilience, how it impacts the business. What can organizations do to become more cyber resilient? And what are the characteristics of a cyber resilient organization? So I think those are some of the things that you'll see coming from us.
And I would urge folks listening to check out that futures report just because it has last year's date on it. Like this is not advice that's going to expire very quickly. Like I think most things in cybersecurity, we tend to think, look at a report and see it like a 2022, 2023 date on it. Well, I'll just ignore that. That's probably out of date at this point. But I don't think things move quite that quickly. So I would still urge people to check out this report. This advice is going to be good for a while.
Thank you so much for saying that, because one of the things we strive to do with our research is make it vendor neutral first and foremost, but forward looking and actionable. So as you said, this doesn't have a shelf life. It's not as though, you're talking about, oh, here's what we were seeing in 2022 with DDoS attacks, for example. This
Right.
is moving forward. Here are things that you can do to definitely make sure that your business is doing better. This is a very business friendly approach to cybersecurity and cyber resilience.
Great stuff. With that, we've been talking to Theresa Lanowitz from LevelBlue. And Theresa, again, thank you for chatting with me today.
Thanks so much, Adrian. It was great to talk to you.